Okay, it's 12 o'clock.
All right, let's go. So in keeping with our Amplify theme for the fall and diversity, equity, inclusion, today we're going to talk about explaining prosperity and disparity in the U.S. to kids. I am one of your hosts, Alexandra James-Okochi, along with Katthe Wolf. Next slide, Andrew. Hi, Bertha from Chicago Commons as well. So the format of our webinar, if you haven't been here with us, has changed a little bit. We'll spend the first part of the webinar giving an interactive background and get set in the context for the topic. Next, we'll have questions from our Be Strong Families More Perfect Union Parent Cafe deck, which is designed to find ways to bring unity while affirming diversity. And the webinar is live streamed to our YouTube channel, and the recording is available after the webinar has ended. So I encourage you to not just look at this webinar, but go look at some of the great content that's been presented over the last, almost a year and a half, 2 years now. Next slide. So the ways to engage, when you're ready to speak, we want you to use the raise your hand function. We'll unmute you, and then you'll have to unmute yourself to be heard. Feel free throughout the presentation to type your comments in the group chat. Make sure that it's going to everyone, and that we ask that you be a little patient. Sometimes when everyone's doing the chat, we have to make sure we can get to everyone. Next slide, Andrew. And our agreements, right? So to make sure this is a safe place, a place where we have some mutual learning, we operate from these agreements. We want people to speak from your own experience and use I statements. We operate in this webinar with the golden rule. We treat people the way we want to be treated. We ask that you bring your full presence and no multitasking. But of course, if you need a minute, please take a minute. If you agree, please type, as you see already happening in the chat. Jennifer Johnson, hi, Jennifer. Please type I agree and let us know you agree with the agreements. Thank you, Tammy. Thank you, Jaquita. Thank you, Bertha. Thank you, Lynn and Patty. Amber, thank you, everyone.
All right, so now we're ready to do the context, yeah?
Yes.
So I just want to say this is kind of a hot topic. It's basically income inequality. And we have a, I guess, different from normal. This is going to be all graphs and charts to kind of set the scene about where we are as a, wait. Oh, did you just go? Okay, to set about where we are in the U.S. Now, I guess 2016, it's a little 5 years ago, but just and over time. And the reason that we thought this is important is because everybody can kind of just, you look around, you see what's happening, but it's really hard to understand at the macro level, to get a helicopter view of what actually is happening. So we're just going to do the facts and come through it. And then we're going to talk about what we think about all this and how we explain it and what we talk about with our kids and with ourselves about the topic of income inequality. So the first thing is we have the highest level of income. US has the highest level of income inequality among the G7 countries. So that's the UK, Italy, Japan, Canada, Germany, France. You can see that ours is the largest income inequality. Moving on. This chart looks at the top 0.1% and their share of wealth in the United States from 1913 to 2012. And I thought this was interesting because, it doesn't include the last decade, which is a problem. But I thought this was really interesting when we think historically about when we were growing up, what was it like, and what was it like before that and after that. So if you see, in a way, what this told me is that way back in 1913, the top 1%, the top 0.1% of people had 25% of the total household wealth. And that was true in the depression, after the depression as well. As a 0.1% had 25% of the wealth share. And then it went down for decades, from the 30s through the war, through the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. In 1978, that was basically when I'm graduating from high school, 1979. I'm old. That was the lowest point of the top 0.1%. But since then, it's been climbing. So when we say the income gap is the disparity between the wealthy and the poor has gotten greater in this country. If you just look at the percent of wealth for the top 1% over the last, since the 70s, it's just climbing up and up and up. And it makes me wonder what's happened from 2012 to 2021, and what is it now? Does the 0.1% wealth share in the United States now, what is it in 2021? Is it higher than 25%? Are we at the point where the top 1%, top 0.1%, not even 1%, the top tenth of 1% has more than a quarter of the whole pie of wealth in the country?
You know what else is interesting right here, Katthe, is that trajectory, especially when we were like 1978, that correlates with the end of the movements. Women's inequality, people of color. I wonder how that and people opening up society and the workplace contributed to that sharp decline. And then it was like, oh, wait a minute. And it starts to move back up.
Interesting. Yeah. Through the 60s, you're saying through the 60s.
Yeah, 60s, 70s. Yeah.
And then Andrew says, interested to see how Reaganomics played a part as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So income inequality has grown. This is comparing 1989 with 2016. And the blue, again, this is the top 10% of our income earners. And so they went from having in 1989, 42% of the total pie to 50%. And the middle 50 to 90% of income earners went from having 42% to 37%. And the bottom 50% of income earners went from 15% to 13%. So this is the top 10% taking 8% of the total wealth to them. So it kind of like explains, this gets us to 2016. Moving on.
And this whole shrinking middle class.
Yes. And this is a shrinking middle class as well. So this is wealth distribution and owning, it's owning the majority, it's owning wealth in this graph. So you can see the bottom 50% in the top one in 1989, the bottom 50%, this is half the people in the country have this green line, this like 1/8 of an inch green line at the bottom of the $100 bill, where the $100 bill represents 100% of the wealth that's owned in this country. And you can see that in 2016, you can barely even see the green line. And
yes,
1 in 10 families in 2016 had negative net worth, which means that they own less than nothing, which if you borrow money on credit cards and borrow money, if you have a mortgage and if you have a car loan, then you owe more money than you actually have. So this is in your net worth. So this is net worth. You look at the orange line, the next 40%. So this is 40%. So 90% of the country only comes up to this orange line in 1989 and then in 2016. And it's not, that one's a little, you can see it, you can see that it's gone down. It went down from 30 to 22%. And the top 10% of Americans owned more than 77% of wealth in 2016. And it was 67% in 1989. So this is giving you a sense of both the way that the wealth is distributed in this country and the way that that trend keeps happening. I mean, the trend is growing. The disparity.
Tammy said crazy.
Yeah.
Tammy commented crazy. Yeah.
Next. So the wealth gap between America's richest and poorest families more than doubled from 1989 to 2016. And this is interesting to me. This is a little bit, more complicated to read, but if you look at this top 5%, you can see that between 1989 and 1998, they were about the same as the highest fifth, and actually the second fifth was higher. Then look at what happened before the Great Recession. They called 2007 was the Great Recession, but look how the top 5% gained wealth up until the Great Recession.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody did, kind of, except for the second fifth and the bottom fifth, but the third fifth, fourth fifth, and the highest fifth also gained wealth. And then look what's happened since 2007 to 2016. It's the richest families are the only group to have gained wealth since the Great Recession.
Mm.
And I didn't realize, looking at this one, what was striking to me is I didn't really realize how big a change 2007 was. Like when you talk about, the Great Depression, in 1929, and the stock market crash and everything, it felt like everybody felt it. And in this one, it was, I don't know, it's less visible,
Yeah.
And even for the very wealthiest people, the top 5% or the highest fifth, they're still gaining. They're just not gaining at the rate they were
Before. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. So anything comes up for anybody as you're seeing this, or any questions, or, like try to figure it out together. Let me know if I'm going too fast or too slow.
I think that 2007 for me, Katthe, I worked for the government at that time at Fairfax, and maybe that's why I was so visible, and it was in Northern Virginia. So that housing market was like crazy, because I remember seeing people buying houses and literally there was no furniture because they were getting these loans way above the way they were calculating the loans. And I remember when it crashed, we had all these furloughs, and I also remember like people were losing it in the DMV. Like there were a lot of suicides, etc. And I just remember in a staff meeting one time, everybody were like, "What we're gonna do?" And it was a coworker of mine from the Bronx, African American male. He was like, "Black people are just gonna do what we always do. We're gonna figure out how to make it work." But I could see. So for me, I saw it like people were having meltdown, and it was like the middle and upper middle class families.
I remember that too. Now that you say it.
Yeah, but I didn't know it. The trend, what was shocking though, was that it continued to 2016. We were kind of led to believe like, okay, we made it out of it, but this says no, it still continues. So,
well, yeah, you don't know how much of it is if it was just stagnant. Like you don't know what it would look like if they just said 2007. And then
right.
You know what I mean? So we don't know year to year, but yeah.
So Heidi said, I think it can depend on where you were in life in 2007. I was just starting out as an adult, and I felt like it's hard to even have a chance because I wasn't able to establish any cushion before then. And I have a lot of privilege as a white, cis, hetero woman. But then just starting out is always for everyone, no matter what you have. It's like a whole situation, that emerging adult transition. Thanks, Heidi.
Yeah, but 2007, she's saying emerging as an adult in 2007 during a recession when people are losing their jobs, and that I can thank you for sharing your perspective, Heidi. That's really helpful. Let's go to the next slide. So the educational wealth gap has also grown. So this is really interesting. I was saying to myself, I have to give this to my kids because this looks at your degree of education and how much money you make, like over or just like on macro, like not individual, millionaires who never went to high school, exist. But if we're talking about like in general, the orange line is a GED or high school dropout. The green line is high school with some college. The blue line is associates or a certificate. The purple line is a bachelor's degree, college, 4 years of college. And you can see again, like in between 2007 and 2010, there's a dip, you know, and we're and up to 2016, working way out of it. Like the income kept rising for people with a college degree through 2007, and then it plunged, and now it's going back up again. And I'm just wondering, you know, I think there's different trends now in terms of what it means to be prepared for a job. I think this one will probably get real interesting over the net between 2016 and 2026. I think the associates and the certificates may catch up to some of the college degree stuff. And that's what everybody's saying anecdotally, is that it's not as important to have a college degree. But if you look at this one, it's pretty important. And postgraduate, look at that. These are your doctors and your lawyers and your PhDs and your architects and your engineers. And look at that. Look at that. I mean, look how much, look at the difference between the median household income of someone with a postgraduate degree, or a family with a postgraduate degree, and someone with a GED or high school dropout. I mean, so it just shows you like the way that wealth is distributed in this country. Next slide. Because this is interesting also, the racial wealth gap. Now we're going to go into the racial dimensions of this, which is the racial wealth gap is large for college graduates and non-graduates. So this is the non-college grad families, and this is just, I mean, this is, I think, statistics in some ways, you know, it's just really a harsh reality that for every dollar in wealth the median white family had, so the median is like the middle, the median Black family had 11 cents and the median Hispanic family had 12 cents, you know, between 1989 and 1998. And from 2010 to 2016, the median Black family went up 1 cent and the median Hispanic family went up 5 cents. But look at the disparity between the median white families and Black and Latinx. It's just shocking. And the next slide looks at college grads. And it looks the same, you know, it's imperceptible that it changed in a way, because it's still a huge, I mean, yes, it's not 12 cents, it's 31, and it's 34 between 1989 and 1998. So it seems like, you know, it went from, for college grads, it closed the gap by like 20 cents. But look what happened between 2010 and 2016, which is it plunged back down again for both Black families and Latinx families as compared with white families.
Yeah, and I know, looking at that, I wonder how much that has to do with student loan debt too.
Student loan debt, there's also inherited wealth, you know, there's also, you know, like, there's a lot of factors that go into why white people are advantaged vis-a-vis, but the thing is, like, when you talk about privilege, like, I think it kind of casts a different light on privilege than just talking about, like, people can't see, like, I'm white, but that doesn't mean I'm privileged, you know. But if you look at like the last graph, you look at the median, the average, or mean is the average, but the median white family, how can you say you're not privileged compared with, you know? So anyway, when you go to this one, the racial wealth gap is largely unchanged. So this is the white Black wealth. So, and if you look at the blue line is the median 50 percentile of white families. And, you know, they went down with the recession, but the Black families went down further and longer and are coming up slower. And that purple line is the median 50%, is the 75 percentile of wealth of Black families. So it's not the 50, it's comparing the 50% with the 75%, because the 50% of wealth of median Black families is down here, with the typical white family having 10 times the wealth of the typical Black family.
Mm.
Next slide. And this is this is the same basic information, but for Hispanics. So for Hispanics, white Hispanic wealth gap. So you can see again, I don't know, Hispanic 75 percentile did really well. They in 2007. I don't know what that's about, but then it also plunged. And so in 2016, the typical white family had over 7 times the wealth of the typical Hispanic family. Typical meaning median.
Mm-hmm.
So that's our context, that we're just wanted to make it real that income inequality is a real fact of life in this country. It's kind of similar to when we did the webinar on mass incarceration, and you just look at the data and the stats, and it's really difficult to contest that this is the situation that we're in.
Definitely.
So
next,
now we're going to go to questions.
And next slide. And again, these questions come from our More Perfect Union parent in the Katthe box that deals with how you parent within the context or the nexus of social justice, covers a range of topics. And then on Friday, you get to experience. So if you have not joined, please come join on Friday so you can actually experience a full Katthe. And right now, we're just going to answer some of the questions. And Andrew's put a link in the Taste of Katthe for Friday. Or you can use the QR code. So first question, how do you talk to your kids about some people having more than others in society? And you can, answer in the chat or raise your hand and speak to us, which we love that.
I think there's a number of different narratives, like the American dream narrative. And I know my parents, the way they talked to me was about, they didn't really talk about the gap. They just talked to me about how if I worked hard and did well in school, then I would have enough. I would be comfortable, So what that led me, like unconsciously, what if you tell your kids that, then what are they thinking about the people who don't have money, that they didn't work hard enough or they didn't do well enough in school, and I think there's a lot of if we're honest, like that narrative in terms of the previous administration, the narrative about, the deserving, that people who are wealthy are somehow deserve the wealth they have, and that people who don't have wealth somehow deserve the situation they have. That's one story that people tell.
Yeah, and Heidi said she usually talks to her 7-year-old in terms of fairness, and little kids really care about the concept of fair. That is so true. And then we have Lucy. So Andrew, I think you just have to unmute yourself.
Hi,
Lucy.
yeah. Hi, how you doing? I'm from Wilmington and New Hanover County Schools. I work as a party liaison, bilingual party liaison, and I have seen our students to kind of lose interest according to growth at the school, or either because their parents are cleaning houses, they don't know any English, and they don't have the motivation there. But at the meantime, some of our teachers are not really willing to kind of come down to their level and say, hey, let me just give you a little boost and help you here and there. I know you know the language, but I know you might facing issues with math or issues with science or any of the classes. Let me just give you a boost and give you a shoulder where you can hold to it and come on and move on. Yesterday, I have a conversation with 2 students, and they were telling me that some of the teachers are kind of mean to them, and they don't really have any interest in those classes because of that. Sometimes teachers have to think about how they approach the student, especially a Latino student, because the language barrier, they can know English, but their writing and grammar is not that perfect. and they might be ashamed of that, and they're afraid to even say something. So we might have to be more like open-minded, how to analyze this thing and help them to get there where, where the question taking us now. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Lucy. I want to get to another comment. Renee says, interestingly enough, in my family, we do not talk about the past. I have heard friends, parents say one generation made wealth, the next lost it all, and so on. Usually falling in the middle and struggling to get by. They did teach me to treat others the way you wish to be treated, to help others, and to be independent. Make too much money to get assistance, but do not make enough money, but do not have enough money to save more than for one rainy day is a struggle. Tamara says, I grew up in a poor community, so we were all in the same boat. When my kids were growing up, we were lucky enough to live where there were better schools. However, we were much lower income than a lot of my kids' friends' families. So when my daughter's friends had things, it got to do things that I couldn't afford for my girls to do, I would remind them that we're lucky. We had everything we needed and some of the things we want. There are so many people who don't even have the necessities. Thank you, Tamara. Thank you.
I remember telling we lived in a school district when my son was in high school that was a very wealthy school district. So we were probably the lower income in the school district, and a lot of the women who were the parents, they didn't work. A lot of their husbands made a lot of money and they didn't do much. So it was really interesting because my son would have an opportunity to go over to these houses, which were like way bigger than our house and way more expansive than our house. And also, like when he played sports, like those moms would be there to drop the child off and would be there to pick the child, and I just said, just so you're not confused, we're not in that category, like that's not where we are. And he would ask why, like, why aren't we there? Why don't you make more money? Why don't you want to make more money? And I talked to him about, and I'm the CEO of an organization. I make some money, but I work in a nonprofit. Like I don't, I'm not raking it in as the doctors and lawyers and the
Exactly.
venture capitalists are. And I talked to him about values and about just that wasn't. I thought that there were lots of trade-offs. And again, I'm coming from a white privileged upper middle whatever background, but the issue of disparity, I mean, and when he saw, like, when he's been to other people's houses when he was little, where they had a lot less, because we were also in a religious community and there were a lot of people that just didn't have much. We were more focused on kind of the beauty of the experience, more focused on the people and the quality of the hospitality than on the the stuff. So
yeah, definitely. I think it's the same thing. The same thing for me. I try to teach my kids about abundance versus richness, and that true wealth is not just money, right? So wealth is great. A quote from Bob Marley that said how he doesn't view, and he had definitely plenty of money, right? Because he sold all over the world, but that's not where he counted his wealth. And it was like you were saying, the people, the places, the culture, and there's the cost in each one. But I'm not going to keep talking because Vanessa has her hand raised, and then Lynn, you are next. Hi, Vanessa.
Yes, hello?
Yes.
Yes, I was thinking, I'm picking back off I didn't get her name, but what she was saying where she lived in a wealthy town. My child, we are Latinx, but a Black family. We're Latinos and we're Black. And our children went to school in the wealthy towns, in white communities. And our kids have graduated with their bachelor's degrees. One of them have their master's degree, but none of them have accumulated wealth as other counterparts from those same communities. They did everything right. They did, I mean, if you want to get technical, they did everything right, what they were supposed to, but yet they have like $80,000, $90,000 in debt now. So when I'm explaining to, I have a younger son, and I'm explaining to him because he goes to school in a wealthy town as well, and he sees the differences. And one of the things that I bring up that it's very important, people have things. Things are not important. Those things could be gone tomorrow. But it's important to understand that you have love, you have care, you have someone taking care of. Be thankful for what you have. We have everything, and someone said it earlier, we have everything that we need. We're not struggling as other families, which I'm grateful for. But, you know, what do you tell your child when you grow up, you go to school, you do this, you do that? Just like society says, you go to school, you'll make money, you'll go to college, get your master's, you'll make money. But yet that we don't see that in the community that we live in.
Definitely. Thank you, Vanessa. Lynn, and then I'll get to the two comments, Renee and Tamara. I see you. Lynn, you with us? I think you just, okay. You're unmuted, Lynn. So maybe you have some technical issues. You've unmuted yourself, but we can't seem to hear you. So really quickly, Renee said, my mom had us donate to local shelters quite often, and I expressed my confusion one day. Why do those with better clothes donate? Why do those with better clothes donate theirs? She helped me realize that life is full of choices, and helping others is not the norm, but it should be. I used to go to a local mission and hang out with families in trouble. This is where I found out our choices add or take away from where we go. Tamara said exactly, even though their friends lived in bigger houses with better stuff, they still hung out at our apartment the most. And then Heidi said, I think it's good to remember that not everyone has the same choices. When my partner and I were struggling financially, we had the resources of both our families to fall back on. They had enough to share so that we didn't become homeless. Generational wealth matters. I think that's an excellent point. Lynn, are you with us?
We unmuted you, Lynn. So you should be able to talk, but you need to unmute yourself. And I guess if we can't hear you, maybe you just need to, type in the chat. Somebody else has their hand raised. Is that correct, Andrew? Jaquita.
Hi, it's Jawita. Thank you.
Jawita, hi, okay.
I'm sorry.
It's generational wealth that I wanted to speak to. I grew up in a time when most Black folks all had the same thing. Our parents worked at the same places or the same industries. So we all kind of grew up in that comfort zone. However, I was bused to a very high income neighborhood and saw things that you see the inequalities and you think, okay, that's where I want to be. Well, when I became a mom, because of the lousy schools in my neighborhood, my child had to go to a private Christian school. Talk about culture shock. So I was explaining to her the imbalance there, what happens. And while she was there, my grandmother passed and she had property. So then we moved to the discussion of generational wealth, which was probably the biggest component of what she was seeing in her school. And I'm like, not all of these folks worked hard and got that. Some of them inherited it, but because of privilege, privilege allows you to borrow and to negotiate. So it's very interesting, the inequalities that you see, and all of the participants have had great points. You talk about what's really important. You can say, yep, if that's what you want in your life, then you make sure you're in school and you're making the smartest choices to get to that. But while you're on that journey, make sure you keep in mind what's important. And it's not the material things, it's what you got in your life and what's in your heart. So This has been this discussion is really great, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
Thank you so much for your comments. So appreciated. Um, Renee says, all I see, oh no, wait, let me go back. Maria said, to Vanessa's point, it's not the stuff that matters. Nevertheless, it's the prejudicial and discriminatory systemic issues that contribute to people of color not acquiring wealth. Agreed. Then Renee says, all I see is that 1, education is needed to aspire. 2, having a parent or grandparents with money helps to give you support. And without the government, without that, the government does not provide like it should. Number 3, the government tends to empower those who quit and do not try to by paying them money, while those who try to pick themselves up by their bootstraps and make progress. The government takes their benefits away as if to slap them on the wrist for trying to work. The struggle is real. People with indivisible disabilities are left to fend for themselves. Thank you, Renee. Lynn says, with my kids, we accepted their friends' circumstances that were diverse without judgment. Lucy said, amen. Tamara says, it's also about opportunities. As the last speaker said, some may have done everything they were supposed to as far as getting an education and working hard. The opportunities offered weren't always the same. Looking at the charts on how much the college graduates were earning, we know that doesn't apply for all of us, because some of us don't have the same opportunities. Sometimes I wonder how people find those really high-paying jobs. And then Maria says, and history highlights how people such as Native Americans were not allowed to keep and own their land, which is a barrier to generational wealth. All super, super, super great points. Maria, that generational, when Katthe and I were talking, one of the things that historically like that for African Americans also was the GI Bill as far as home ownership after the Great Depression. And so that kind of contribute to the generational gap. And then I wonder too, when you see that rise, like we talked about from the 70s, and then it starts to decline in the 80s, and how much of what I like to call the crack era has to contribute to that and the fragment. Maria was like, yep, it was geared towards white men, and the growth of the suburbs also was a part of that GI Bill. Tamara says, such a great conversation.
Renee said, also have to change your perspectives to think you can when everything around you says you can't. And I think that that's really important, because people I know closely who didn't have a safety net, didn't have, like, I was resonating with something, let's see, who was it up here? Someone was talking about how the privilege of having parents that you could fall back on, that would make sure that you wouldn't be homeless, and that not everybody has that. Not everybody has, the ability to be able to feel like they can make mistakes, because the people who make a lot of money, they make mistakes too. They go up and down, but they have a safety net. And it's hard to believe that you can do it, when you're surrounded by the opposite, and the pressure is high to take care of your family, and you don't have a safety net.
That was a great point, Katthe.
Renee said I had a TBI from a tumor removed at 1989. And whenever someone says I can't do something worth striving for, do not say I quit. Say, darn, I have to find another way, then find other ways. Like when Tammy says, like when Trump said he got a small loan of $1 million from his father. LOL. Yeah.
Definitely. Great conversation.
Next question. Yeah, it's a great conversation. Let's go to the next question. We probably have time for a couple more.
So what do you think about the idea of a universal basic income, which means that everyone gets a minimum amount to live on? This should be interesting. So I'll jump in. Oh wait.
Tammy says become a reality.
Renee says, I made it through college with assistive technology, readers, note takers, okay, and books on tape, okay, and now that would be on CD, LOL.
Probably be MP3 actually.
Right, right. I like this idea as long as it isn't, it gets, I'm scared of it in the sense of if technology replaces a lot of industry, will that mean that then people are stuck there? That's my only caveat. Not that it's, that people should have a living wage.
Mhm.
Everyone should be able to take care of their families. It's not like there isn't enough, but like if that's in place and then technology takes over a lot of industries, what are the implications of that? I don't have the answer. It's just a
So Jennifer says, I like it, but it doesn't address root causes of inequalities. And Lynn says, also, we told our kids that there will always have people who generate more income than they do, and there will also be others who make less. We told them to do their best and value their contributions to society, given their unique gifts and passions and interests. And Patty says, well, where does the money come from? And Heidi says, I think it's really interesting. I think it could really enrich our society because people are more free to do things that they love instead of being forced to work simply for a wage. And Tammy said, just thought that every family would be able to have food and shelter would be wonderful. Maria says she'd need to research the idea further, but not a fan, as I think there are things within our current system that can change without having to adopt this model. And Renee says a set income will encourage people to have more children to build generational wealth for the close families. Is that really a good idea? I think this is different than a universal basic income, but I think the living wage idea makes sense. I think it's terrible that you can work a full-time job and not make enough money to be able to pay for basic necessities, that you would have to work 2 or 3 jobs to just be able to, pay for food, clothing, shelter, medicine, etc. And so I think the living wage is a good idea. But
yeah, and I think, the other thing, like if to Jennifer's point, right, about the whole doesn't address root causes, if there was some level like healthcare drains people's finances, the loans drains people's finances. There are things in our society, and looking at, and it'd be interesting, those other G7 don't have these income disparities. What are the social systems that they have in place that just evens the playing field? Because that's really what we want to happen.
And Renee says, I would rather see the government pay people for working, for helping others with your kids. And Lynn says, would other economic factors have to be universal? And Vanessa has her hand raised. And then let's move to the next question so we can get some more.
Hi, Vanessa.
Hi again. In regards to universal basic, income, I don't think it would actually be a good idea. And the reason why is because I think somebody said it, the playing field is not the same. Everybody can make the same amount of money. It's what you do with the money that makes the difference. So you can have 10 families making the same amount of money, but what schools are they going to go to? Are the schools all the same? No, they're not. Is the community the same? It's not. So it's going to impact people differently in different communities. So that's why I think it's not a great idea. It sounds good, but it's not great.
Great point.
Renee says, can you imagine trading skills of doing laundry for others while another can lend therapy or yard work or carpentry, while another cooks for others in the community? Why are we not encouraged to help others in our community? Great questions. And we are on that, Renee. We really are on mutual reciprocity and how can we reknit fabric of community so that people can, so that people can be interdependent in community and not just have to be self-reliant, so to speak. Let's go to the next question, Andrew.
So what relationships or situations have made you feel wealthy, and what have you said or done about it? This question really reminds me again of that Bob Marley quote. He was actually very kind of upset when the guy asked him, well, don't you consider yourself a wealthy man? And I think it is a difference between being rich and having wealth. we a lot of times, I think here, equate wealth just to monetary and not to what the other things that you see happen. Renee says also, to her point about the mutual reciprocity, you only see it happen in families or in churches. Maria has her hand raised. Hi, Maria. You can unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
So it's interesting. Just today, I was listening to the radio station, and I can't remember how they worded it, but they pretty much said that it's the relationships that matter. Because you can have all the stuff and you can have all the things, and you can even see the richest people being the ones that unfortunately will commit suicide or will, just have a very unhappy life, live a very unhappy life. For me, the relationships are my family. I work in social services, and it always like boggles my mind when people are coming for assistance, but they don't have anybody within their circle, their family circle, that they can depend on. So I didn't realize how great of wealth I had that growing up. We're in our family, we're very much connected and community oriented. Even living in housing, I lived in a public housing growing up. Like the community was my family as well. So not having that, I don't know if it's called human capital or how it's identified, but that in itself made me feel wealthy and continues to make me feel wealthy.
Agreed. Thank you, Maria. Tamara said, definitely that feeling of having a loving and supportive family makes me feel wealthy and blessed. Money is a separate matter. Lynn says, however, in some countries, there are professions that are low paying here that are valued differently with higher incomes, such as teachers. True. I have friends who moved to Dubai and immigrants to teach because of how they value teachers, and it's amazing.
And also, like, I don't know, I don't know if this is true, but I heard that like in some countries also, like doctors don't make as much money, that so I think that it's a good point about what do we value and what do we compensate,
Yeah, which Tamara says a lot about our country and what we value. Exactly. You two are like on the same wavelength. Heidi said, I don't agree it doesn't happen outside of family. I know that when I don't know what that is.
Many folks who contract services often pay in trade. My masseuse trades massage for salon services. My partner traded building a fence for childcare.
Nice.
Yeah, I think it is happening, Heidi, in some places and in some communities. And the question is, how could it happen more? But
Yeah,
I think it's also people's reality, like we were talking about, like it might not be happening in some places, like somebody could say, well, I've only seen it happen in churches, or I've only seen it happen in families. But it's great when we share with each other and we realize that, hey, it's going on in other places too.
Definitely. Vanessa says, my family and friend support helps me feel wealthy, but when crisis or something comes up, we come together as one for resources and not just financial. Renee said, I never felt wealthy until I met so many people with no homes. My sister spent time in Addis Ababa in Africa, and they lived so minimally. It was eye-opening and humbling.
Yeah, and it's in Ethiopia.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
I'm gonna go to
let's go to the next question.
Next question. What have you or someone you know done to overcome multi-generational poverty?
I know somebody, I know somebody that the way that he overcame multi-generational poverty was by making friends outside of his neighborhood and outside of he looked at where he wanted to be and then found people. He's very charismatic and very multi-talented, but just kind of he lived in one area and there was a very wealthy area adjacent to it and he hung out there instead. So it's interesting.
Renee finished up her comment, said there it seems that they are trapped by different tribal languages and can't step out of it because of it. I just would caution, we can't make universal blanket statements. Ethiopia is an entire country. I think there might be pieces of that, but it's also a very developed nation as well. Vanessa says encourage education. And then Lynn, we're gonna try again. She has her hand raised.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, my father and aunt, they pursued higher education to overcome multi-generational poverty. Their parents were very poor. I've heard stories about putting newspaper in their shoes so they can walk to school, you know, because that's all they had. And yet, they never took on the energy that they were victims. You know, when I've heard my father talk, it was just like we did what we had to do. There was an opportunity to go to high school and to go to college under the GI Bill and that sort of thing. And they took it, you know, when opportunities presented themselves for education, and they went on to become teachers. And I think that's what I saw, and that's what I felt in growing up. And so when it came my turn, you know, to consider college, it was like a no-brainer. You know, it was just like high school, college. I'm not sure what I'll do, but that energy of you can make a decision, you can make a choice to do the best you can was just there. And again, my mother tells me that Christmas gifts was a candy cane and an apple, but yet she never felt that it wasn't enough. You know, people have talked earlier about having family, and that's true wealth and connections and knowing they're loved. And I think that helps to overcome multi-generational poverty, you know, to do the best you can. And it's not going to look the same as somebody else's best. And that's the way, you know, we respect each other's differences to defy the struggle or to overcome struggle or the challenges, because there will always be challenges in a systemic country like ours.
Mm-hmm. Tamara said there's still, this is still one for the other question. I'm thinking that bartering happened more in days past, because then it became more necessary for people to work outside the home. So people are generally busier and have less time to help with their neighbors. Maria said she furthered her education, acquiring stable housing and employment. Renee spoke about I guess the language Amharic, and that there were some women who worked as prostitutes, which is awful, and those who had jobs are usually translators or security guards for the wealthy. Katthe said when she was in Addis, jobs were very scarce, and women who had
Renee. That was
okay. Oh, sorry. Okay. Education, training, choices, stay away from drugs and alcohol and gambling, and usually find a church or support groups or organizations.
Yep. And Andrew says he wants to know, we should go to the last slide. We only have 2 minutes, so it might be leaving some people with this. So there's 2 questions on this slide. Is that right, Andrew? How do you feel prosperous even when you don't have much? And what are you teaching your children about prosperity? I think we've touched on this a lot here in terms of what we're teaching our children about prosperity and how you feel prosperous. People have said things like their friends, their families. I think it also has to do sometimes with treating yourself occasionally, you know, or self-care. Like, I don't know. I think people look at this different kind of ways, but, you know, when I didn't have money, sometimes it is worth it to go get something for yourself just to make yourself feel a little bit not poor, you know? So
I think with for me, one of the things that I teach, and I think somebody hit on it, I think there's a fine balance between understanding the systemic inequalities that's in America, that's, you know, happened in Africa because of colonialism and imperialism. And then there's that independent, not being a victim and being resilient, you know, and there's a balance is what I try to tell my kids. Like, you know, there are these systemic things that we need to know work on it whatever way that we can, and understand it does hit differently for different people. But at the same time, don't let that deter you, because you still have the ability as an individual and a sovereign soul to manifest what you want to manifest in your life. So it's that micro, macro juggling and the power of the mind. When others thank you, you earn respect. Thank you, Renee.
How do you feel prosperous when you don't have much?
Same thing. I'm quick to be like, you know what? I'm gonna just get me something, or even with the girls, or like just take a bath. Sometimes just taking a bath, like a really luxurious bath, makes me feel like, okay, when you're in those spaces, like waiting to the next paycheck.
It reminds me, I'm very privileged, but when I was in India, traveling in India, and they would have festivals, and everybody it didn't matter how much money you had. People didn't have money. They didn't have wealth. They couldn't make wealth, but they made the party. Do you know what I mean? It was a religious festival. They made the party, and they made and there was so much like happiness and joy in celebration. And I think there's to learn from that. Like you can feel wealthy or prosperous, like you're moving forward if you're full of, joy, and you have, I think it's also learning makes me feel prosperous, like continuing to learn and grow as
Definitely.
a person. So Vanessa says, be thankful for what you have. Don't focus on what you don't have. Create family and friends, which allows for rich culture and open hearts and sharing and caring for others. And Maria says, yes, Alexandra. And Renee says, teach your children you can and will mentality, and also let them know you can love, respect, care for, understand, and help yourself and others. It's okay to be kind.
Yes.
Enjoy the little things. Enjoy those experiences and the people that you spend them with. I feel prosperous when experiencing something with those I love, as opposed to feeling prosperous because of material goods. And Maria says, yes. Kathy. Tammy says, yes, and doing work that's rewarding and trying to help others live their best lives also helps me live my best life. We have to be thankful we can see, walk, talk, and love. Yeah.
Right. Definitely. And I think also, like, just really quickly, like splurging, like I'm really like into like Black business and like splurging locally, because that like makes me feel good. Like I'm buying something for myself, but then I'm also helping the macro at the same time. Like if there's a woman-owned, Black-owned skincare company. So it's like those things make me feel really, really prosperous, even if I don't have much. Sharing your talents. Yes, Renee. Teach others to crochet, do crafts is a big one for me. Even fishing and soccer or cleaning and cooking and passing it on.
Awesome.
Lovely.
This was a great conversation.
We need reaction emojis because y'all are on fire. I know, right? Someone should do that.
Prosperity. Amplify prosperity. And let's go to the next slide. So we have a new calendar. It's a perennial calendar. You can use it all the time. And it has these hashtag amplify when we ask people what you want to amplify. So we want you to put in the chat what you want to amplify, but also think about getting this community created resource for someone you love. Splurge on a community created resource for someone you love.
Exactly. And it goes to a great cause.
That's right. Go to the next slide.
So you can continue the conversation with the More Perfect Union Parent Cafe in the Box. You can check out our website, all our other cafes, and then don't forget you can experience a taste of a cafe on Friday.
Amplify gratitude. Nice, Maria. Thank you.
Nice.
We have this week we have a Spanish webinar tomorrow on mental health, a route for everyone. And then we have a More Perfect Union Cafe on Friday. On Monday, it's Indigenous Peoples Day, and we are off. Oh my gosh, I have a break. I'm so happy. Okay. social equity in your house. I think it is on Monday in Spanish, and Wednesday or Tuesday in Spanish, and Wednesday we have creating inclusive communities with Ahmad, who will be back. So Ahmad Budgerade, they've done a lot of webinars for us, and they're amazing. So you can check them out on our YouTube channel, and come next week.
Yes, and thank you everyone for participating. This is very, very great conversation.
Family, friends, I love these amplifies.
Yes, enjoyed it. We hope you have a beautiful rest of your day and feel wealthy and prosperous.
Yes.